Welcome to Chuck's World of Infinite Mojo, brought to you by Holy Chuck Burgers. Our business is burgers.
Good morning, Katarina Witt. There's no such thing as bad boys, only boys with bad hair.
Sponsored by Maxwell's Clothiers, your bespoke tailor since 1961. And now, your host of Chuck's World of Infinite Mojo, Chuck Bastie. Hello again, welcome back, and thank you for joining us on this episode of Chuck's World of Infinite Mojo. I'm Cam LaRock, your producer, and of course I'm with the host, Chuck Bastie. Chuck, how's it going today?
Pretty good, Cam. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. I'm pretty excited about this podcast. We got a pretty big guest today, so
who is our guest today?
Maybe some of us might have heard of him. He only scored one of the biggest goals in Canadian history. His name's Paul Henderson. Might ring a bell for some people. Yeah. Yeah,
not for people your generation, but for my people. I think I'm just I was like 6 months old when Paul scored that goal, September the 28th, 1972. So I don't really remember that, but I've seen that clip no less than 1,000 times.
I mean, I was born in 2003, and I've also seen it 1,000 times. So
yeah,
it's a really monumental goal.
Yeah, and you know what? Rather than introducing Paul and not doing it justice, I thought we could just defer to video. So why don't we show everyone who's tuning in today for our guest Paul Henderson, and leave it to Foster Hewitt.
Hands it out that way. Here's a shot. Henderson made a wild stab towards Bell. Here's another shot. Right by the score. Henderson has scored for Canada. Henderson right in front of the net. And the fans of the team are going wild. Henderson right in front of the goal to go. With 34 seconds left in the game. An absolute bombshell over Paul Henderson after 15.
As everyone is overcome by emotion, there is a realization, unforgettable moment.
You know, it's funny, even just watching that, no matter what age you are, if you're a Canadian, that's currency. You know, like you just have that as that one thing that binds us all, you know, especially prior to the Cold War. You know, I'm surprised we as Canadians have never apologized for that, you know, because like that's what we do as Canadians. We apologize for everything. But yeah, so without any further ado, why don't we bring up our guest, Paul Henderson? There he is. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Good to be here. Good to be anywhere.
Tell me something. When you watch that clip, do you, I mean, I know you've been, you said this 1,000 times, but you've been riding that way for 50 years. But do you even does anything come back to you at all with that goal?
Well, the thing that amazes me is I've thought about it many years. Clark Ellis and I were on the ice, and we come off with about a little less than 2 minutes left. And I figured it's all over for us, you know, and he sent out Esposito, Cornway, and Peter Mahovlich. And then and the next lineup was Gilbert, Rattel, and Dennis Hull. And so, you know, we're not going to get back on the ice. But for some reason, Sinden come down and he said to us, if there's any time left, you're up. And so, man, the two Hall of Famers went past them. And so anyway, I'm sitting there and truthfully, never did this before in my life, never did it again. But the Russians had told us that if the game ended up in a tie, told us this in the third period, if the game ended up in a tie, they were going to claim victory because they said in European hockey, they'd scored one more goal than we do. And so the 1 minute mark, I did something just never thought it. I just stood up and I couldn't get on the ice and I started yelling at Peter Mahovlich. Never did it before, never did it again. He come off, I jump over the boards. And the thing that irritates me, I scored 7 goals in that series. 6 were really nice goals. And I've had to listen to that garbage goal for 50 some years. Drives me crazy. The one I scored in game 7, I went through the whole bloody team now. Well, my ego couldn't have handled it. So it's a good deal. It's a good thing it was a garbage goal, but it counted.
You know, you're stepping on my toes right now because I was actually going to bring up Game 7's goal because that's my favorite goal. Because, like you said, you went through the entire Soviet Union, the entire country from like East Coast to West Coast, split everybody down, and then beat Tretiak. And hey, have you ever were you ever at a function where you saw Tretiak and he was able to speak English at any one given point, and you guys had a conversation about anything about that series?
Oh, this is the best ever. I was inducted in the International Hockey Hall of Fame, and it was over in Stockholm. And so anyway, there was Sundin went in that year, and Peter Forsberg and a couple of others. And it was my turn to get inducted. And who comes out to introduce me is Tretiak. They'd kept it a secret.
Wow.
And he'd come out, and he said some nice things about me. Probably because he had to. But anyway, it was right at the end. He looked at me and he says, "Paul, I know why you scored that last goal. I've looked over those replays over and over. And Paul, the reason you scored that last goal was," and he looked at me and he must have waited 10 seconds. He says, "Paul, it was very bad goaltending."
Oh, wow.
And he came over and gave me that big Russian bear hug. And I've got to know him well over the years. We've done a few things together. But just a great guy. We hated them in 72, but we should have hated their system, not them. Yeah. Because they were like us, like you and I, trying to keep a wife happy. Is that a little bit of a job?
Full-time job.
Raise children. And so I've got to know them, and they turned out just to be a terrible system they had to live under. And, but anyway, yeah, just a great guy.
The one thing about Tretiak that I've only ever heard, and this was, were you ever at that Red Army movie by Gabe Polsky? It premiered in Toronto International.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, and so Gabe went over there and he got a bunch of interviews done, and he didn't have Tretiak on camera, but he said to me that Tretiak, when he asked him about that goal, he's like, if you look at the tape, and he's like, I've viewed that tape 1,000 times. Like, instead of actually having that puck come around, he should have went around the boards with that puck and cleared it on the side, as opposed to trying to keep it up where Esposito stabs at it, creates that bounce, and then you just, got off your ass and, from taking a wild stab at it, like Foster Hewitt says, and come over and had a couple whacks and put it home, and 34 seconds later, you're the hero of the town. But, yeah, that was where Tretiak was saying that if you would have went around the boards, that's a totally different conversation, and maybe that doesn't happen as well, but who knows? But God bless Gabe Polsky that movie Red Army. I've had Gabe on my podcast before, and it was just really, really well done. And when they premiered it at TIFF in 2000, I want to say it was 2014. The last night, Brad Dalgarno had organized all of us to go down on a bus, and Sittler and Gretzky and Messier and all the guys came down, Mark Osborne. We got to sit in that theater. Must have been 1,000 people watching that. And just the energy in that room, just watching that goal again from all of our All-Star, idols and NHL icons. Scotty Bowman was there. I mean, it was a massive, massive moment for us as well. So, and I apologize because I know you've been seeing and talking about this for 55 years, but I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about it.
Oh, I can't remember if I was there or not at that night. I don't remember being there. I don't think I was there.
Oh, yeah, it was a fantastic movie. If you get a chance to see Red Army.
Yeah, I think I was away, and I missed that. I really did.
Oh, that was a great movie.
Well, if I did, but of course I had 6 concussions, so I could have well been there.
Let's talk a little bit about when you got back from that. Obviously, we're going to go back 50 years. You come back as the talk of the town, and you're in every newspaper. You're a Toronto Maple Leaf at the time as well. It just completely changed your life on every way. Were you prepared for the tools that you had to learn after that goal changed your life?
No, I wasn't prepared for it. It was at all. It was just too much too fast. All of a sudden, I'm a pretty good hockey player. I wouldn't have been in the series, but I was not an all-star or anything like that. And so everything just come on, like I couldn't go anywhere. My wife and I couldn't go to dinner. I mean, people would come over and we'd be starting our meal. People come over and want an autograph or something like that. And I got a great story. About a couple of weeks afterwards, I lived out in Mississauga, where I still live, actually. And I was up at a stoplight. I was going down to a practice, and the light went red, and we had to stop. And the guy, there was 2 lanes, and the guy next to me looked over and saw me, and he, oh my God, and he jumped out of the car, one round, I got to get your autograph. And of course, the light went green, and guys started peeping their horn. And the guy says, "Shut up, it's Paul Henderson. I'm getting his autograph." Another guy got out of the car. So anyway, it was a good side to the bad side. But the bad side of it was Ballard was in his ramps all those time, and we were not getting along very well either. And I knew we had no chance to make the win the Stanley Cup, because we'd lost half our players to the WHA. And so it was a very difficult time for me. And then, of course, when I come back, the games would be close at the end of the game. I mean, I could just feel, get Henderson out there. And the only time I ever went through the whole team was this goal I scored in the 7th goal. And I tried to do things that I wasn't good at. And, that's a kiss of death there. So it was bad on the ice, and it was bad off the ice.
Well, Jason Priestley came out with that movie about Ballard, just last year.
Yeah.
And I understand you've had a chance to watch that movie, but
I did.
Not only just watching the movie, but what emotions or what experiences came back in your mind, watching the testimonies of people talking about Harold Ballard or the 70s or the ownership of the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Well, I sat there. My wife was with me. We watched it together, and the guys that spoke did a great job. Eagleson spoke. I thought he handled himself really well. Daryl Sittler spoke, and so Jimmy McKinney. And so I think they portrayed him really, really well. And so I thought the movie was really well done and well put together. And so it told the story of who the guy was.
Yeah, and obviously with Harold Ballard, he's a prickly character. And, there's a lot of people that, in the aftermath of that movie said, why do you feel the need to stomp on a dead man's grave? And my response was, well, the way he lived his life, it was like a biography, a biopic that we're talking about. But one of the things I think the people that I've played hockey with that played for Harold or with the Maple Leafs during that era as well, a little bit more prickly, talking about their experience with Harold. And they're all pretty consistent. There's only 1 or 2 that were prized childs that were the Golden Caps that couldn't be touched under Harold's reign. But that must have been a very harsh time, or a time where you would carry a lot of resentment towards Harold back in the 70s, correct?
Well, I did for a while, but after I became a Christian, you go back over and you look at the good things and the bad things, and it became very evident to me that he lost his wife in 1969, and he lost his keel. And I know how influential my wife is with me, and if I get out of line anywhere, shape her, she'd straighten me out in a hurry. And then, of course, he hooked up with Yolanda, which wasn't the best choice in the world either. And so after, and really, my mentor, after I became a Christian in 1975, and I got a mentor, and he knew how much I hated Harold Ballard. And he said, "Paul, you need to forgive him." And I said, "Well, God will forgive this son of a, what?" And somebody's got to hate him. It'll be me. And he said, "Paul, you need to get rid of that anger and bitterness. You need to write him a letter, and you need to apologize to him. Apologize to him. You said a lot of things about him, not good things." And so he just said, "Paul, you and he may never," he said, "he'll probably never respond to you, but you got to write that letter and get it out of you. You got to get that bitterness out of you." And so I sat down and I wrote him a letter, a 2-page letter, and I told him, "I apologize to you, and I ask for your forgiveness of being, saying such terrible things about you and that kind of stuff." And I never did hear from him for I was in Montreal about 5 years later, and him and Clancy were down there, and I said hello to him, and we had a little chat. And I said, Harold, did you ever get a letter that I wrote you? And he said, yes, I did. Thank you very much. And got up and walked away. So we never had a conversation about it. But I did feel like into this, I felt sorry for the guy. I'd hate to see where I was with, well, you know how much I love Eleanor.
Yeah.
And she is and so, yeah, I got rid of all that. And, I read a book years later. It says, to forgive someone is to set the prisoner free, and to realize that you were the prisoner. Yeah. And I got an ulcer because of that sucker, because I'd go to bed at night and we can't, but when you don't have any anger, bitterness in you, you can live freely and lightly. And so in one way, but it turned out well, but I hated his guts for a lot of years. I'll tell you that.
You bring up a couple good points there. So I have the saying that holding a grudge is like it's like swallowing poison and expecting the other person to die, because it's just that fruitless. Yeah. I mean, the experience of resentment or anger or hatred, it resides in us, and it has a real biological effect on our body. It increases heart rates. I got kidney stones one time, because I was just so raging angry. And I've never had worse pain in my entire life, and I just realized that, carrying that around, that anger, yeah, it takes a lot of energy to be angry at anything. And like you said, just releasing that, forgiveness. One of the most important things I think most people, I would like them to understand about forgiveness is never condoning the behavior of the Harold Ballard in your life. It doesn't condone what they did or didn't do as right or wrong. What it does do is it allows you to be free of that behavior and let that flow. And again, I got three types of business in my life. There's my business, there's your business, and then there's God's business. And I have no power at all in your business, and I certainly have no power in God's business. Worry, I outsourced that years ago. That's God's business. He's got a plan for that. And he'll take that the way he wants to go, and I'm just the actor on the stage, and he's the director, and I pivot when he tells me to learn new lines or like scene change or whatever that is. But forgiveness was a big one for me. I actually had to really learn how to forgive. What was your trick in learning how to forgive and set that free?
Well, you read the Lord's prayers that He'll forgive you as long as we forgive other people. But if we won't forgive other people, He's not that so good in us. So. But just like you explained, the reason for it, but I didn't understand that. Before I was a Christian, it was all about me, and I had to perform, do this and that, and then you realize what the gift God gave us, that He loved us and so much, even when we're idiots. He loves every one of us, and He even was willing to die for us. And then when you think about that, what He did for us, and that's what He says we're supposed to be salt and light in this world. And so it takes, but nobody changed overnight. Like, I've been a Christian for 1975. I've run a men's ministry since I became a Christian 75, started ministry in 85. And I'm still not where I want to be. I'm not where I used to be, but I'm not where I should be. And so, being a Christian, it's a journey. Your life is a journey. And so it's one day at a time. And the really good thing about it is I go to a Anglican church, and the thing I go about there, we take communion every Sunday, and we go up there and we confess our sins. We take the bread, we take the wine, and you walk away there, and God says, as far as the east is from the west, so far have I removed your sin from you. And so it's nice to walk out of there with a clean slate and knowing that you belong to God. And like, I have 3 daughters, and I love them very much, but they were not perfect, but they were mine. And that's what and the other side of the coin is, I became aware that my wife was God's daughter. And so, Henderson, you better treat her well, buddy, because there's going to be a day of reckoning for you, because you don't want to mess around with God's children. Just like you can mess with me, but don't you mess with my wife or my children. You're in serious trouble then. So, but life, your whole life is a learning experience. Like I had a men's group this morning. We met from 7 till 8 o'clock, going through a wonderful book. And then at 9 to 10:30, we had 40 hockey players on, and we meet once a month. And most of us are Christians. Some guys are still looking at it. But it's a wonderful time of fellowship. And we pray for one another. And we got guys with terrible diseases. We had Mark Curtin was on. He's got ALS. We got guys with, Parkinson's. And there's, I think, 6 of us have cancer, one degree or another. And so, but we encourage one another. And down the road we go. And like we've got a breakfast coming up too.
We do, and I want to get that in a second, but I'd be remiss if I didn't pull this up as well. But I think one of the things about camaraderie, support groups, men being able to share what we have to share, being vulnerable in the moment, being able to have that. You introduced me to a wonderful friend named Gord Clark, and he's been a part of your Leader Impact Group for a couple decades now as well. And I've just enjoyed every minute I've ever spent with Gord. And we get together Friday mornings, like you say, you did this morning, but we get together at 6:30 in the morning. We're done by 8. And it's just probably the best part of my week, when we can sit there, like you say, and you have each other in support roles as well. And, that's meant a lot to me in the past year to have that as well. And there's not a lot of space for men, I think, these days, that we can actually be vulnerable with each other, not feel in fight or flight, or someone's trying to steal our house or our job or our wife or our kids or our job, and just be able to be with each other and just have that friendship as well. And you mentioned your mentor as well. And I want to ask if that was Mel Stevens from Teen Ranch.
Well, it was Mel that led me to the Lord. Obviously influenced me, but when I went to Birmingham in 76, I'd been a Christian for about a year. I got into a group down there by a guy named John Bradford, very, very successful businessman. And there was 8 of us, and we met from 6:30 till 8 o'clock on Monday morning. And this guy modeled for me what it was to really love the Lord. And he was very, very well businessman and done very well in life and everything like that. And we'd meet for 6:30. But he would get up in the morning and he would spend 45 minutes with the Lord praying for us. And when I found out, I said, John, we're saved by faith. I mean, we can't earn it. And he says, Paul, I wouldn't trust myself. He said, if I'm leading you fellas, I want to make sure that I'm pure and open. And he got us memorizing scripture. And so he was a guy that made me write the letter. Well, when I come back to Canada, I knew that God was calling me, Paul, I want you to do the same thing for guys in Canada that John Bradford did for you. And all the spiritual disciplines, when I started the ministry, I just replicated the way he taught us. But he came to me and he said, Paul, well, what happened, we were in the group for about 3 years, and him and my pastor came and said, we've got some new guys that have just given their life to the Lord. And we need somebody to lead them, and we want you to do it. Oh, man, I can't do that. I've only been a Christian for 3 years, and so I need a lot more training than this. And sometimes you need somebody that's got more confidence in you than you have in yourself. And John said, Paul, you didn't even realize it, but for the last year, you've been really leading the group. Your passion for it, your discipline, and your enthusiasm. And he said, I'm just sitting back, and I know you didn't realize it, but you had basically leading the group. And so sometimes you need that word of encouragement. So I took 8 guys and I started meeting them and I started leading them. And gosh, they came together and they became my good friends. And I just loved doing that. And then when I retired, the Lord says, I want you to go back in Canada. And that's the way I started with 3 men downtown Toronto back in 1985. And we met for about 3-4 weeks. And I said, if you any of your friends that, might want to take a look at the spiritual side of life. And I don't want guys that are going to church. I'd sooner have the guys that are out on the orangutans, like a lot of hockey players were. And so we had a breakfast and I shared a little bit about it. And I had 2 of them talk about what they were getting out of it. And so we ended up with a group of 12. And that was my first group. And then it just took over. And then When I got cancer, I had about 80 groups going.
Wow.
And now it's the U.S. come up about 5 years ago. Well, I got some other people to stay over. Like, I'm not running it anymore, not the strategic planning and all that kind of stuff. But I got it going. I ran a pretty good mom and pop shop. Well, 80 groups is pretty good, you know. And Gord Clark was in one for a long time out in Oakville. But now we are in 77 countries. We're in 921 cities. And now we have men's groups, women's groups, and now we have mixed groups also. And because there's a lot of CEOs that are women now, and they want to be with their peers. So it's just mind-boggling how it's taken off. But the Lord got me out of the way to get some real entrepreneurs in there and take it. And some of those guys that I've led to the Lord, they're better leaders than I was, including Gordy Clark.
Yeah. And you know, it's really, you mentioned the word journey early on the podcast. But I think it's really playful how the big guy upstairs, you know, directs the play that we're playing in. Because I got a call one morning, you know, at the night before, saying, hey, listen, our goalie went down for this charity organization that we're playing tomorrow up at Angus Glen, and we need a goalie. So it's already paid for. Can you just come out and play? So I said, yeah, sure. So I go up to Angus Glen, and I walk in the dressing room, and who's on my team but Mike Gartner and Mark Osborne?
Oh, gracious me.
My very first game as a kid, my dad was in the armed forces. We were posted down at the embassy in DC. And so as a kid, I grew up my very first game watching rookie year of Mike Gartner, that small glass at the Capitol Center. And my dad used to say, hey, watch that guy. He's going to be really good. So I walk into the dressing room and I see, you know, he's got, you know, his number on the jersey with Gartner on the back. And I see he's got a coffee and coming from behind me. I want to be a bit of a clown. So I just say, who's this Gartner guy? Does anyone know who this guy is? Is he our pro? And obviously, you know, Mike played for 20 years, and I think he's number 6 on the all-time goal scoring list. But as the humility that Gartz has is just overwhelming. And I had an amazing day on the ice and off the ice. And to my surprise, Mark Osborne says, hey, listen, we're looking for a goalie for our 3-on-3 skate up at Gartz rink. Would you mind coming up and playing with us? You know, if we need an extra goalie here and there. So I got to play with those guys. And one time I remember I had a really bad game. And I remember putting my head right down between my legs. So they wasted everybody's time in the morning. And those guys there, they lose a skip in their step, but they can still play the game. And Wes Jarvis, God bless his soul, looks over at me and says, hey, what's your problem? And I just said, Jarvie, I'm just really sad. I ruined everybody's game today. And he just said, what do you mean? And I just said, oh, it was awful. I couldn't stop anything today. Like everything beat me glove through legs everywhere. And he's like, are you under the impression that you're here because you're a good goalie? And I'm like, aren't I? And he pulls out his phone and he goes, Chuck, I want to show you something. I got Cujo here. I've got Glenn Healy. I've got all these guys here. Like, are you a Hall of Fame goalie? I'm like, no, I'm not. And he's just like, get this to your head. You're here because we like you. And I thought that was the greatest compliment he could have given me, you know, because those guys there, they enjoy their friendship. They enjoy their relationships. And watching them in the dressing room was a treat because they just chirp each other all day long. And that's how my podcast came about, because I was saying to Jarvie, I'm like, you guys should have your own show. And you were one of my very first guests 10 years ago on the podcast. And you were just battling with leukemia at the time as well. And that was 10 years ago. And you said something I'll never forget. You said, it's not, I want to be here, but if I'm not here, that's not my choice. That's up to God. And I'm just going to live my life. And it's been 10 years later, Paul, and you're still kicking.
No kidding. Well, it's funny you mentioned those 4 guys, because Ozzy and I take on Jarvie and Gartz every year in a game of golf. And we've doing this like for 15 years. And you want to see guys that are competitive, and you want to see chirping. It is just the highlight. And I got to take them up to Devil's Pulpit this year, and which is just a great golf course. But, you know, when you get guys and, you know, we sit there and we always pray before we go out and play golf. But when we get on the golf course, you know, just
yeah.
But one of these, they're going to beat us one of these times. I know that, but
you know, it's funny too, because that you mentioned this, because if I talk to Ozzy about this, Mark Osborne, he just says, you know, he's like, don't let Henny ever tell you anything different. He's a really good golfer, but he plays the cancer card. So he's always looking for strokes. So it's like, and he's Paul Henderson. So you have to give him strokes, and he knows that. And he always ends up beating us, but he only beats us because he's like a great negotiator with strokes. So I want to get your take on that.
Well, and that's not actually the truth. I've never asked for strokes in my life, and I never would. And I won the club championship at Mississauga when I was 61. And at that point, I was 2-3 handicapped, but it's every year it's getting a little worse. But well, we do give us strokes, but I'm not the highest handicap on there. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. And, you know, the one thing I love about that group of guys is they're all involved with HMI, Hockey Ministries International.
Oh, yeah.
Paul Allen was just a wonderful influence as well. Jeff Jackson, I just can't say enough about Jeff Jackson with HMI. But Mark Osborne's been involved with HMI for decades now as well. He's the one who introduced me to you, to have you on the podcast 10 years ago. You're going to be speaking at the All-Star game up in Toronto, which is the first time they've hosted the All-Star game since, I think, the year 2000. So it's been, you know, a little bit of a time since Toronto's had the All-Star game. But they have a breakfast in the morning at the Royal York Hotel. So Mike Gartner is going to be there, John Van Beesbrook, yourself, Laurie Boschman as well. But just speak a little bit about what you're going to be talking about, what HMI really is.
Well, I got involved with it, obviously, back here, too, because Mel Stevens with Donnie Lismer come up to Teen Ranch also. So I got to know Donnie way back then also. But Gartz and I spoke at the first one in Montreal, 1993. And that night, Gartz scored 4 goals and won the car.
Oh, yeah.
And but we were the 2 speakers and Ronnie Ellis came down with us. Ronnie and we shared, and we're going to go on a panel again on Saturday morning, and we'll talk about what it is to walk with the Lord and how to get to know the Lord and encourage people to, look into it. Because a lot like myself, if Mel Steves hadn't come along, like I'd go to church. My wife she went to church all the time, but I just never slowed down. It was, for me, it was all about proving myself and providing for my family and trying to be financially very secure and those type of things. But I forgot about the spiritual side of my life until somebody slowed me down and asked me to take a look at it. And he had the patience of Job, which when you start out as a cynic, it took me 2 years to give my life to the Lord. But the good thing about it, the day I gave my life to the Lord, March 12th, 1975, which actually turned out to be Mel's birthday, which I didn't know at the time, I put a stake in the ground that day and I said, Lord, I am yours. I want you to help me be the man that you want me to be. And I would never take that stake out of the ground again. And so every day I try to live for the Lord, still work in the ministry, and I'll never retire. Like, I'd be so bored. I had 2 Zoom calls this morning and one this afternoon. I love this. And so, but two of my buddies from Birmingham phoned me this morning, and one has Parkinson's right now, and the other was Johnny Musso. He was 4th in the Heisman Trophy. Played at Alabama. They were actually teammates on Alabama. Played for Bear Bryant, and so they come up here last year and spent a few days with me, and so they phoned me today, and I had a chat with them, and all those memories come back from so many different places. You develop friendships, and both of them love the Lord, and we were talking about the things we've done, and so life is good. And I told them this morning, I said, I can't think of anybody in the world that's more fortunate than I am. I wouldn't change places with anybody in the world. I don't want to be a day older or a day less or anything like that. And there's certainly a lot of people got a lot more money than I do, or bigger houses, cars, or whatever you want. But I got the best wife in the world. I got a great family, and I enjoy life to the fullest because I know where I'm going to spend eternity. God says, He promises that. I am signed, sealed, and delivered. And so there's a lot of days when, Lord, this would be a good day for you to come back because I am ready and willing to get out of here. And you know what, Chuck, when we get to heaven, Augusta National will be a dog track. That's how good heaven is going to be.
And everybody's going to have that really nice, nifty green jacket.
You got it.
I want to bring up some pictures as well, because obviously there's a segment that we have just to kind of go over, and we'll have Cam pull them up and you're just going to talk. There you are. If I can read the card correctly, this is Paul Henderson hailing from, if I can read the card correctly, Kincardine, Ontario, which is next to Lucknow, Ontario. So I'm doing a play on words for the slap shot, but obviously I can get away with saying Kincardine because I live in Kincardine, obviously, which is where you were born, and then grew up in Lucknow, which is where my in-laws are. So I'm privy to that. But this is when you came and visited us last year. A very rare visit for you to come to Kincardine to speak at the Legion here. What do you remember from this crowd?
Oh, I had a great time. Of course, Gord I knew very well, and I knew as well. Some even Clark Pollock. I grew up with him. He's a character, isn't he? And we were the first arsonists, I think. And anyway,
that was a funny story.
Yeah, Touchman. Of course, his son is now a referee in that. But a lot of, and two of my, my cousins, Patsy Henderson was there, and so yeah, it was just a great morning.
Yeah, the first time I met Clark Pollock, I played an old men's league, and he came over with Paul Cato. And I guess I was the first goalie there that had never heard any of Clark's stories. So I brought 2 beers over to me, and he just said, "Hey, you're the new guy. I brought you a beer." I said, "Hey, Clark, that's great. I don't drink beer." He's like, "Great, I'll drink both, and you can listen to my stories."
That's Clark. Well, if you'd offered me one, I would have taken it.
Yeah. There might have been about 100, 150 people there. Your book was on sale there. Did really well. It was great. The papers were there. It was, the prodigal son returns, everyone, when Paul Henderson comes in the dead of winter, it was the day after Groundhog Day up at Wyerton there. And the weather wasn't that great, but Bruce County weather. But to have you up there was wonderful as well. The whole town was buzzing about you coming back to town and speaking as well. And you kept it light. It was nice and funny, and you shot from the hip. The only thing I'll say is you got me in trouble there because you talk so much about Eleanor, your wife, on there that my girlfriend, when we left, she's just like, "Why don't you talk about me like he talks about his wife, Eleanor?" So I got a bone to pick with you about that because that put me in some hot water as well. So there's the Holy Check truck that's in front of the Davidson Center. Right over top of the hood there, you can see Paul's monument. So the story is, there we are in front of the sled, but there's a plaque there commemorating that you were born in Kincardine.
It is. Actually, great experience with that too. Actually, it was January 28th in 43, and all the roads were closed. And so my dad had gone overseas in September of 42, and Mom was staying out at the Henderson farm down near Amberley. And I guess about 1 o'clock in the morning, she went into labor, and Grandpa and Grandma hitched up the team of horse and a sleigh and put some bales of hay on it. We went, and they actually went up the lake because the roads were closed. And I was born before we got to the hospital. And the nurse, Dixie Bell, on her 90th birthday, I met her for the first time as an adult. And because they were doing a documentary on my life. And she told me, she said, when I picked, she said, if it would have been 5 minutes later, you would not have survived. You were blue at that point. And she said that your blood covered with blood and straw and everything like that. And she says to me, "I know all about you because I gave you your first bath."
Wow.
And that's what a great story. At her 90th birthday, I met her. And she remembered the day just like that.
That's amazing. And there's your jersey up in the Davidson Center as well. So how does it feel, to walk into the Davidson Center, see your jersey up there for Team Canada?
Well, obviously, it's an honor. I was a pretty good hockey player, but the defining mark of my whole, was that series and scoring the goals in the last 3 games. And so, and I think it's really helped me in the ministry too, because I've had guys tell me, "Paul, I had no interest in the spiritual things, but I want to meet you. And I came and I heard you talk, and something within me says, maybe I should look at this. And even Gord Clark. And, he came and he was nowhere spiritually back then. And I got him in one of my groups. And so, but I was speaking to a company then. I used to do a fair bit of motivational speaking for companies also. And I had to be careful of how I brought it out, but everybody knew that I had a spiritual side to my life. But so that goal definitely helped in the ministry, because so many people have said that I was never ever thought that I'd come and get in a group, but I did, and there you go. So.
Yeah, I love the title of your book, The Goal of My Life, as well, because everyone thinks it's going to be the goal that you score, but it's really not, has anything to do at all with that goal. It's a play on words. It's a genius. Who thought of that title?
Well, I was in that group with John Bradford, and he told us, he said, write a purpose statement for yourself. He said, think of the man you want to become as a husband, a father, a friend, hockey player, and think about it. And he says, take a couple months or two, whatever you want to do it. But he says, make a list out of the things in those. And so anyway, I worked at that. And I used to have lunch with him at all too, as I was trying to get everything out of him. And so anyway, after about 3 months, I had about 3 pages of notes. And I came and I said, John, take a look at this for me. And he did. And he said, well, Paul, he said, a purpose statement, you need to get it down to 1 sentence. Well, why didn't you tell me that to start with? And he says, well, take your stuff and go back and get it down to 1 sentence. And I'm a little bit competitive. And I said, I am going to get this down to 4 words. And so I worked at that, and I back in. And so back in 1980, I think it was 87 or 88, my purpose statement is I want to be a godly world change agent. What does that mean? Godly means that I want to try to live every day in a manner worthy and pleasing to God. And then I thought, well, maybe I scored that goal to use it in a wide as expanse as I can. And because I wrote down world, I'll speak anywhere, I'll go anywhere and do it. I've spoken at every province. I've spoken in 20 countries around the world, telling people there's a God out there that really loves you, and he wants you to get to know him. Done that in 20 countries around, been to Siberia even, been back to Moscow 4 times. And so a change agent, that's what Mel Stevens led me to the Lord. And then John Bradford changed my life completely when those 3 years I spent in his group. And that's what I wanted to be, a change agent in other people's life. And that's lead them to the Lord and help them become the men they want to be, should be in their home, in their business world, whatever that would be. And then part of a community in your church or groups.
I love that word, change agent, as well. This is, I don't know who painted this. Maybe you can tell me who this is, but this is a mural in Lucknow. I pass every single time I go to Hackett's to get eggs. It's just right across the street from the arena, kitty corner. But I don't know what year they put that in there, but that has to be like one of the greatest. You're on the side of a building that's going to last, long after you're no longer with us, But I mean, like, what did you think when you saw this?
I was amazed. It was a total surprise to me. I didn't know they were doing it. And then one of my buddies that said, Henny, we need you to come up. I forget what they asked, whatever it was. And then take me around. I want you to see the side of the building. And yeah, well, it is. I mean, it is. They've just done it. Well, they've had the guy come back again, and they had to repaint it because it started to fade a bit. So it looks good again. But I said, well, it's starting to look like me when before they did the red. Anyway, a great honor, no question about it. But I'm very proud of growing up in Lucknow, and the Chin boys. Got to know them a bit too, and they were the ones that gave me my first. I didn't get a pair of skates till I was 9. We were so poor, and so I played ball hockey in their basement of the Chinese restaurant, Ellen, and them, and we would peel the potatoes. They had a potato peeper there, and we had French fries they sold, and And yeah, it was, what a great family.
I didn't know anything about the Chin brothers until my mother-in-law in Lucknow was telling me about, and she knows less than nothing about hockey. She will be 81 in next week. And she was telling me about the Chinese restaurant and the Chin brothers. And George has passed away. And Kevin Shea, the author and sports writer, wrote a wonderful thing on Facebook. Thank you, Kevin, for that, about George Chin as well. And they actually mentioned you talking about George growing up as a kid, and watching the Chin brothers.
Yeah, they were great. Alan was a year older than I was. And Alan's he's still out in Vancouver. And I talked to him on occasion. But George had gone by the time I came back to Lucknow in, I think it was 53. And so he was gone. I never saw him play, but I did see Charlie and Jack were the twins. And then Morley was the next one. And Morley coached me a bit when I was, and they gave me shin pads. I used catalogs, put those around me, and they gave me a pair of shin pads, and they gave me my first pair of hockey gloves too. And but learned mine playing, ball hockey. And then, of course, back then they didn't sand the roads or anything, so we played all our hockey on the roads up in Lucknow. And the rink was always closed on Sunday, and then a bunch of us, we'd break in. We found out how to get in underneath, and we'd go out there sometimes and skate on Sunday. And we're probably 11 or 12 or something like that. A lot of great memories of Lucknow, though.
Yeah, that's a small little town as well, but there's one more picture I have. We were at Mike Wilson's house in Forest Hill. I think he since sold it, but I was sitting in the car with Steve Ludzig from Niagara Falls, and Davey Gorman was in the car with me. I had no idea who Davey Gorman was, and we were driving up to the event, and it was a Birmingham Bulls reunion for the WHA. That Mike Wilson, the Leaf super fan. And I mean, if anyone hadn't seen Mike Wilson's basement, it rivals a small hockey hall of fame for Toronto Maple Leaf fans. I mean, it was truly spectacular. And there you are in the background of the picture. And I took a shameless selfie of myself with you in the background there. And I think you're talking to Les Binkley at the time. And I didn't get Les in the picture because there's a BlackBerry, and well, it's a BlackBerry, but I use that picture every September 28th when you score that goal every single year. And I put that on my Facebook as well. But I thought that was a really great picture because your hair probably looked a little bit more like mine back in my day.
Well, there you go. There you go.
And I think we got one last picture that we're just going to roll over to. And there's two good looking guys there in Kincardine, Ontario at the Legion as well. And thank you for coming for that event as well, that Leader Impact. We've been able to create a chapter here in good old Kincardine. And Gord Clark and I thank you immensely for that.
You're more than welcome. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the 3rd.
And that's the next thing we want to go to. So we're going to go to Royal York Hotel, February the 3rd. We got tickets with HMI. We're going to put the banner up as well and all the links in the podcast as well. But anything that you want to really kind of preview what you're going to talk about for All-Star Weekend with the HMI event?
Well, we'll be talking about life. We'll be like we always do when I talk. We'll be trying to encourage people to slow down and take a look at the spiritual side of life. That's the whole HMI. The same thing we were doing this morning. It's not going to change.
No.
Circumstances change, but we're God does not have plan B. We're plan A. And it's guys like you and me, and after we do come to the Lord, like the day I gave my life to the Lord, I actually said to him, don't you ever expect me to tell anybody about this, because I'm going to be a Secret Service Christian. The only guy that knew that I was looking into this was Ronnie Ellis. And now when I look over and I didn't, Ronnie Ellis, one of my best buddies in the world, and another friend that lived in Simcoe. And I asked Mel, I said, I got two really good buddies, and I'm not sure how to share my faith in that. Can I bring them up to the Teen Ranch for a weekend? And we can talk about this. And so he said, sure. Well, so we went up there, and the 6 of us spent a weekend. Friday night, Saturday night up there. And within the next 2 weeks, all 4 of them gave their life to the Lord. And the life we've had since, it's amazing. So I'm out there fishing all the time. But, I never try to argue somebody into it. All I say is just look into it. Get into one of our groups. Like if you're up there in Kincardine, get into one of the groups and there's no dumb questions. Yeah. And you can, you don't have to make all the mistakes other people make. And God says that, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. You get up when I stumble trying to get into the bathroom in the night, you're stumbling around, then you turn on the light, and that's when you come to know the Lord. A light goes off, and just like you know now, Chuck, there's a way to live your life, a better way than putting yourself on the throne and living in the self-centered life. There's a lot better way to live, and God shows us how to do it.
I used to say that I'd really perfected the way that didn't work. Like I worked really hard and I know that my way just never works, right? And like saying, like, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plan.
Well,
because there are certain things, like I thought I should have been a pro hockey player. And, I got involved with a church in the 80s that was probably what you would call a cult. But they had the Jewish Sabbath. So we didn't play hockey from Friday night to Saturday night. So there went my junior years. And, Jamie Sturgis drafted, Trevor Kids get drafted. Those are my guys in my draft year as well, that I think I could have made that. And then when I got in with Ozzy and Gartz and Jarvie and, Rocky Dundas and these guys, I started playing with them. Like, I just realized, you know what? I got the answer. I could never have been a pro hockey player because these guys let me history every single time. And I got amazing closure from that. And, then I was able to think about this. But, what a small world this is. I'm covering the Owen Sound attack this year. So I'm driving from Kincardine up to Owen Sound. And while we're in the media side, I'm talking to this one gentleman beside me. His name is Nick Kennedy. And we start talking, as you do. And he mentions the name Rocky Dundas. And I'm like, Rocky Dundas may have played 4 or 5 games in the NHL, but he had a shot that was like an assassin. It came out of and I made one glove save on him, and it was like my career glove save. And he was still disgusted about that. And the only reason Rocky Dundas didn't like flip me the bird is because he's a man of God. He's a pastor. And he's like, Rocky? I'm like, yeah, Rocky used to play hockey with us. And this guy, Nick Kennedy, and I got along together, and we've been like really great friends up until now. Just met him a few weeks ago. But it's like, it's that bond that you meet somebody where you're anchored in that frame of mind, or that mindset, or that faith that drives you, where you're just not white knuckling it through life. Like you said, 10 years ago, when we were talking on the podcast, I didn't know how much longer you'd be around, and neither did you. And you didn't care. Like you really, truly did not care. You're like, hey, listen, I'd like to be around for a little while longer, but that's in God's plans. And I'm just going to keep living my life. And 10 years later, you're still here. So I guess what I want to ask is, like, where do you want your legacy to really reflect on a life well lived?
Well, I think this, the legacy that Ellen and I have been praying for 40 years, that we would like our legacy to be that from our roots, our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren would all be followers of Jesus, be lovers of Jesus. And we had 3 daughters, we had 7 grandchildren, and now we've got 8 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
And at this point, everybody has got a spiritual side to their life. Well, obviously, the great-grandchildren are, but all our grandchildren, and 4 of them are married, and 3 of them are in university, and all of them are very close to the Lord, have a strong spiritual life, and our kids have good marriages. And so that's the legacy that we would like to, it would be so neat. And we won't know till day, because that's a big deal. But if the Lord takes another 100 years, but that's the legacy we want to live. All our descendants would be followers and lovers of Jesus.
Yeah. There's a day that's coming as well that, we don't know when it is. And again, like I wrote a book about this, I have no idea when that day is going to come, but I know that I need to have closure as if every single day is the last day I'm going to live. And have I had the conversations with the people? Have I told them that I love them? Have I told them that I forgive them or asked for forgiveness, wherever that was? So that way, if there's, I say this in the book, but like if you have a final 5 seconds and you can't change anything, you can't talk your way out of it, and you just look to your side and you see a bus coming down, instead of making a really messed up face, you sit there and say, you know what, I'm good. You know, I've lived my life properly. I am proud of my journey. I love my kids. I've told them that. I wrote them all letters to tell them all that. I want to stick around a little while longer, but at the same time, if I have to go right now, I'm okay with that as well. And I think that's a pretty good gift if you can give that gift of closure. Call it emotional life insurance is what I call it. You know, you can live your life that way. And I didn't have that until you were on my podcast 10 years ago and you actually said that. I didn't believe you at the time, but now I actually do believe you.
Yeah. Well, the thing that you get excited about, what God's got, like the way the world is today, it's just like it breaks your heart. And I am so thankful that I live in Canada. But you can imagine you lived in the Ukraine today or in Gaza. And when you recognize that like we are so screwed up, it's unbelievable. Yeah. And if we didn't have a hope in me, and God's going to make it all right at some point, when he comes back, and just like we can't earn it.
No.
And so how we live our life is because the way I'm the husband I am because I love my wife, and the Christian I am because I love the Lord. And so just here you go. And nobody, I've got stints in here, and I've got a 95% blockage up here, and I'll probably take a heart attack before I die of cancer the way things are looking. But when you like, there's no sense being, because you're going to go you're going to be with the Lord, and never a tear will be shed. He says that, and he's got a place prepared for us.
People say that, but like when you say that, you really believe that, which is, I think you're going to be 81 next month.
Yeah, January 28th, 81.
Yeah. How many years you and Eleanor together?
Well, we've been married 61 years, but we went together for almost 4 years before we got married. So we laugh at each other like we go into brushing our teeth at night, and we, who the hell are these two people in our bathroom? But I can tell you, I'm probably more in love today than I was the day I got married. And she has been, I firmly believe God made her just for me, because we were so opposite. She is the least competitive person I ever know. She doesn't even know how to spell competition. And she would sooner lose a game of cards to make the other person feel good. You play tiddlywinks with me, I want to win.
You'll ask for strokes. Well, before we go, I want to cap off with my favorite goal that you scored, which is the Game 7 goal. I mean, like, you literally went through everybody, and I could say that if you get when you do pass away, I want you to stay for a little while longer. But if you could have a conversation with the big guy upstairs, that he switches those goals. He makes Game 7 and Game 8 backwards, because that would be a really great trick that only God could do. But you're banging away for game 8. Make that the Game 7 that you get to go to Game 8, because if you don't score that goal, there is no Game 8. That's even in the books. But let's have that Game 7 goal before we go, because that was a real beauty. Cam, why don't we cue that up?
The Ballard is trying to get out. Lob to the head. Henderson going down.
1, 2, 3, 4.
To the defense. Goes right out. He scores! Henderson right through the score for Canada. A beautiful goal by Paul Henderson. Henderson makes a beautiful move on this goal, and he's being mobbed by his teammates. But this
How
is
did
an
you get through all of
absolutely
those guys?
beautiful move by Henderson, and the goal judge was a little slow in putting the light on, but there's no
On his ass.
I imitated Connor. I imitated Connor McDavid.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was Victor Tikhonov coaching that team at the time. Those guys would have been all sent to Siberia, because there's 5 of them there. And if it was touch football, I think you only fell on your own accord because they didn't touch you and you still shelved the puck.
Well, the thing about it was really because he tripped me from behind, and Tretiak come out, but I knew I had to go upstairs. And when I was falling, it was easy to go upstairs, and so I snapped it and right under the bar. And but the Lord knew I didn't. My ego couldn't have taken. I'd have thought I was something special, you know. And so He knew that I'd have to live with a garbage goal, and then I wouldn't get all arrogant and that kind of stuff. So I actually thank the Lord for him, as much as my ego would say, "What's that seventh goal?"
Well, as a goalie, I always say, they only count the ones that go over the line. So it doesn't matter how it goes in. It only matters that it cross the line. So like a couple of times, Gart's, hit posts on me on breakaways, and I just say, but I didn't stop you. He's like, Chuck, like if you kept the puck out of the net, if it doesn't go in, then you stop me as well, whether I hit the post or not. Like there's an angle there, right? So, anyways,
well, you're
Paul,
playing with the best because they could shoot the puck. Garch could fire that puck, couldn't he? Unbelievable.
He could dot an I at 20 yards.
Yeah.
And one of the funny stories I'll say about Gartz is I had just had my mask painted, and I had done it myself. I was so proud of this thing. And he was really fighting with his sticks because he used to, use wood sticks. And he's, as you know, he's a masterful edgeman. He has masterful edge work with his skates. He's got great legs. He's got a great stride. And on a 3-on-3 rink, it takes him 2 steps to get away from anybody. But he tees up and he hits me in the bucket, and it just kind of goes off. And I'm like, I just had that painted, and then he goes around the side, and he came in and he unloaded in front of me about 35 feet out, and it caught me on my flat spot on top of my mask, and it knocked me out cold. And I'm up there. My mask goes off, and I'm in the dressing room, and I was really angry afterwards. So I called up Ozzy, and I just said I was really angry about Gartz because, and now I've got a concussion at this time. And Ozzy says, well, call him up and have a conversation with him. And, only a man like Mike Gartner, who's got the most integrity of anybody that I know, I called him up, and I was concussed, and I was really angry. And I'm like, you can dot an I at 20 yards, and you hit me in the face twice in that one game. And the last one knocked me out. And it was a complete 1 in a billion shot because it was just a flat spot on my mask that the puck hit. And he says to me, Chuck, I'm going to be telling you the truth here. In my 40 years playing hockey, I've never hit a goalie in the face in my entire life, not in minor hockey, not in like the WHA, not in the NHL, and certainly not men's league. So the fact that I hit you twice in one game just needs, like, if you know a guy who's got a great sticky manufacturer, I need a new stick because I can't hit the broadside of a barn with this thing. I'm really sorry about that. And that just took away all my anger, all my frustration. And I'm just like, you know what? And if it wouldn't have come from anybody but Mike Gartner, I wouldn't have believed it. I'm just like, okay, good talk then. Okay, yeah, okay, I'll let you go, Gartz. Thanks a lot for the call. But that could never happen with anybody else other than the guy, who just is got the integrity and the humility that Mike Gartner has.
God bless you.
Yeah. Well, Paul Henderson, thank you very much for coming on the show today. We will see you in Toronto on February the 3rd at the Royal York Hotel for the HMI Classic, coming in for the morning breakfast. You're going to see Laurie Boschman, Mike Gartner, Paul Henderson, and John Van Biesbroek is one of the 4 speakers that are there. And Paul, we will see you then. Thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Good. Well, there'll be a bunch more of us there than those guys also. If you're an autograph fan, come that morning because you'll do well.
Yeah, and we'll put the links up on the podcast as well, so you can go there and buy tickets. I think they're $60 for the breakfast in the morning. You can also be a sponsor as well with HMI, hockeyministries.org. And then come out and have a conversation and meet some of the legends.
My wife asked me this morning, are you guys taking a bus down, or what? How are you getting down? You're not driving down that morning, are you?
Well, I'll probably drive the night before,
and
then stay down in the city as well. But I think Gordon and I are going to buy a table down there.
Oh, good.
And then and get maybe Nick Kennedy. We mentioned this at the Owen Sound game that he wants to come down as well. So
good.
There'll probably be about 8 or 10 of us as well. So we're going to come down.
Good.
And watch you guys.
We'll see you there.
Okay, thanks, Paul Henderson. Thanks for being our guest today.
Take care.
And that is Paul Henderson, ladies and gentlemen, living Canadian icon. I keep going back to 10 years ago. I think Paul was my second podcast that I ever done. Jeremy Roenick was my first. And then Paul Henderson comes on board, and humility. Thank you, Mark Osborne, for setting that up as well. But we will bring on our producer, Cam LaRock, up and see what the Generation Z thinks about Paul Henderson.
I mean, Chuck, I just want to start off by saying I just appreciate the way you conduct your show, because you could have had Paul on here and just talked about hockey for the past hour, and that would have been great. But of course, you got to talk about that game 8 goal. But then you took it a different direction, and you gave Paul an opportunity to talk about himself and some things that other people might not know about him, and a lot of stuff I didn't know about him. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are glad that they got to hear that side of Paul's story. So I applaud you for doing that.
Thanks, man. And I said this to Paul 1,000 times, but like, I have no interest in talking about game 8, the goal, because I truly think that life is a journey. You're on this earth, for a short time, and the work he's done off the ice will change way more lives and impact more people that he will never have the idea of what that ripple effect will be like. In the millions, like if you touch the hearts and souls of 5 people, the ripple effect that changes lives is in the millions. 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. So I really want to thank Paul Henderson for, as he says, putting his ego aside with the game 8 goal, but really stepping outside of that and embracing his faith and getting into family. I love what he said about forgiveness, because it honestly is one of the things that we as human beings need to practice more. Is just, like, forgiveness is just the way to get rid of resentment, anger, grudge holding, anything that's going to hold you back, which is just wasted energy. Go out and live your life and do something fun. Concentrate on the good things. Celebrate the people that are in your lives that make differences in the lives of other people. And then, you slowly take off the layers of the onion, where you shed, people that you don't need in your life anymore, that you used to think that you did. But now, are they giving back to other lives? Are they touching everybody else in their lives as well, or helping support them emotionally, physically, spiritually, any of these things as well? That's really what we're on this earth for, is for that. I mean, hockey's nice, and I love hockey. But again, if you can use your platform to speak more to humanity, I applaud Paul Henderson wholeheartedly for his work off the ice as well, because he's a wonderful human being.
Yeah, of course. I mean, just such an inspiration and just an inspiring story, just to see how content he is at this part in his life.
Yeah, especially playing golf.
Living with no regrets, it seems like. Just
Yeah,
so happy.
he's just, and honestly, he said this in my podcast 10 years ago. Like, he had, he just had cancer as well. And, he said this to me, and I did not believe him 10 years ago. He's just like, I don't care. Like, I want to be here. I want to see my grandkids, and I love my wife. But if, God takes me tomorrow, then God takes me tomorrow. I got no power in that, and I'm just gonna live my life. And 10 years later, he's still here amongst us and still doing his work. And God bless him for doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I want to thank our title sponsor, Padskins, for producing this show today as well. Our good friend Mark Phillips has been a wonderful human being as well in his own right. I really love Padskins because it gives kids small wins. It gives them the ability to have confidence that if you look like a pro, that you can play like a pro. And all the young kids who are in minor hockey and house league as goalies, if you get a color that goes along with your team and you're able to put that peel and stick on your gear, or have name bars, or do cage skins for your mask, any of these things here makes a goalie feel like he plays the part. And small wins, give them small wins. It gives them confidence. If it gives them confidence, it'll give them mastery, and every single parent can get behind that. So I want to thank Padskins for being able to sponsor the show as well. I want to thank the good people over at Mixed Chicks for making hair like this happen, because truly there is no such thing as bad boys, only boys with bad hair. And again, for Holy Chuck Burgers as well, and Maxwell Clothiers for rounding out the sponsorship as well, to bring people like Paul Henderson to you as well. And as always, I'm Chuck Bastie, thanking you for tuning in. I realize you could be anywhere that you could have been today, but I want to thank you for sharing some time with me and Paul Henderson and Cam LaRock, my producer. I'm Chuck Bastie. We will see you next time.